Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole. So glad you can join us this afternoon. Looks like we are starting with some elephants at Aldonia Lodge in Kenya. What a wonderful way to start with two elephant bulls. My name is Maxine Gaines, and I am looking forward to some interesting chats and conversations with you all this afternoon. So please engage with us, send through questions and comments. Would love to hear from you all. Really a fantastic way to start with elephants. Who could ask for better? I love the way elephants often rest with the tips of their trunks just kind of folded over and resting on the ground. Almost looks like that trunk is quite heavy. It's just resting it on the ground. We often see elephants do that. Old spotted wood dove calling there. It's almost a mirror image of each other. How beautiful is that? Welcome, Penelope Kenyon. What do you say? You just finished cleaning up debris from a horrific storm during the night, which hit the KZN coast. Yes, we've had some incredible rain in KZN over the last while, certainly in the last 2 weeks. There's been some flooding and some really, really heavy rain. So sorry you had lots of debris to clean up. We had lots of rain in Durban last night as well. That's where I am at the moment, down in Durban. But over the weekend was up close to Tembe, at a game reserve up there, and also had plenty of rain. Everything was just flowing. All of the seep lines were flowing. The roads were flowing. There was just water everywhere. It was actually quite magnificent to experience that amount of water on the surface. Ah, Lenny, thank you for that lovely welcome. It's great to be back. Um, yeah, I've missed live at the waterhole, but I've also had 2 fantastic weeks at Juma, so it was amazing. Really very special to be there. Love watching the way these elephants um, kind of manipulate the water before they drink. It's almost like they splash away any potential debris from the surface and then suck things up. Jason, you're asking how do the reserves help to relieve the animals during the floods? Jason, the animals don't seem to be very much affected by the floods at all. It's more the human infrastructure, the roads and any human infrastructure that often gets damaged. But the animals seem to just go about their business as normal. Um, they do say that some animals are capable of sensing, when a river's going to come down and flood. Maybe they can sense the vibrations of the approaching water. So they say that hippos will move out of rivers before the flood hits. Um, Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but it seems likely. I mean, there is a lot of evidence of animals being able to sense weather conditions before they come. Yeah, the reserves don't normally need to worry too much about the animals when we have heavy rainfall. It's more the roads and the bridges and any lodges or buildings or dam walls and things like that get damaged in floods. And Mark, you say it's a bit of a silly question. I don't think it is at all. How are elephants transferred from reserve to reserve? So, Mark, couldn't really be that much of a problem up here in Oldonyo. Most of Kenya, the reserves are not fenced, and so the animals kind of make their own way from one area to another. But certainly in South Africa, where many of our reserves are fenced, they would need to dart the elephants, and then there's a whole game capture process that happens. They generally, if they are going to move elephants, um, if they're going to move a whole herd, they will have to dart the whole herd. So that happens via a helicopter. So there's generally an aerial team involved and a ground team. And once the animals are darted, they get loaded. It's quite phenomenal to see how they actually pick these elephants up. They put special straps around their ankles and lift them up, sometimes with crane, so that they're kind of hanging upside down in the air. Um, and then they put them into crates and onto trucks, and then transport them around the country where they need to go. It's quite a process, a very expensive process. It's quite risky for the animals, so it needs to be done by a really experienced team of people. And these game capture teams, the really good ones are quite sought after in the industry. They'll have a very experienced pilot who really knows how to fly around these wild animals and kind of almost herd them into the areas that you need them to be herded into. And then the trucks have to come in, and you obviously have to have vets that can dart and monitor these animals and make sure that they are okay during the whole process. So it's quite a process. Mm. Okay, well, we're going to leave this chap at his waterhole for now. We're not leaving Kenya. We're going to go over to Lentor and see what is up the waterhole at Lentor. Awesome. We've got some baboons. I can watch baboons for ages. This will be a different baboon to the baboon we see down in South Africa. It won't be the chakma baboon. More likely to be the olive baboon. I love the way they sit like that, arms on their knees. It's very human-like. These are all youngsters here. They don't look. Well, there's an adult female with. Oh my goodness! Look how tiny that little one is. Oh, did you see how she went down to cradle its head when she was going down for a drink? It was so sweet. Just cradle the head of her baby, keep it out of the water um, as she goes down to drink. Oh, there we've got a big male there. Huge male. So, Lenny, you're asking, is it the male lion, leopard, elephant, etc., that determines the sex of the offspring, like it is with humans? So, basically, yes. What happens is um, the chromosomes that determine sex in most mammals, I think all mammals, there might be some exceptions, but if there are, I'm not sure. Maybe, yeah, I'd have, but certainly in lions and leopards, are XY chromosomes. And so if you are a female, you have two X chromosomes. And if you're a male, you have an X and a Y chromosome. And then what happens is, as a female, I can only pass X chromosomes to my offspring. For the father could pass an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. So if the sperm that fertilizes the egg has an X chromosome from the father, then that offspring is going to be female. But if the sperm that fertilizes the egg is carrying a Y chromosome, then that offspring will be male. So basically, the female has no control um, over the sex. It's the father, whether the Y chromosome is passed on via his sperm to um, to the offspring. So if the sperm carrying the Y chromosome fuses with an egg from the female that has an X chromosome, then you're going to have an individual that is XY, and that means that individual is going to be male. And that's the same in, I'm pretty sure, all mammals. So just going to double check that it is the same in all mammals. Picasso, you're saying you know the Birchel's cuckoo is the bird bringing rain in South Africa. Um, Before moving to South Africa, I was used to the red-chested cuckoo as the harbinger of rain. So I suppose both are. I mean, they both tend to call in the rainy season. Um, Red-chested cuckoos being very vocal as our rainy season starts because that's their breeding time. And Virtual's cuckoos, you know, red, Virtual's cuckoos may be a little bit almost less so, although, you do hear people say it's the rain bird, and if you hear it calling, it signifies rain. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard Birchel's cuckoos calling when there hasn't been rain, so I think it's just all a case of these birds call predominantly in summer, which is the rainy season for most of the country. And so, just kind of by coincidence, um, their calls happen to coincide with rain. And I suppose it helps that the Birchall cuckoo call sounds a little bit like water being poured out of a bottle. So it kind of is a watery sound as well as being a summery sound that happens when the rainy season happens. So there's a few coincidences there that mean that it probably is associated with rain. Here's some zebras in the background there. I'm just looking at Y chromosomes. So even just Googling, it says most mammals, but it doesn't say, it doesn't give any examples of any mammals that don't. Okay, so it says some rodents have lost their Y chromosomes and have evolved new male determining genes. So that's interesting. I wouldn't have said it was rodents. I would have maybe thought it was some kind of very primitive mammal like a marsupial. But it seems like there are some rodents. No. You don't know whether or not to believe AI or not. In another search that I've just done, it says in placental mammals, the presence of Y chromosome determines sex. So placental mammals would be mammals like you and I, or like these baboons, elephants, anything that isn't a marsupial would be considered a placental mammal. That's kind of what I would have thought. So I'm a little bit suspicious about the rodent one. I'll have to go and do some more research. What does the name primate mean? And are baboons not mammals? Baboons are definitely mammals, and they are primates as well. So a primate is, gosh, what is the actual meaning of the word? I don't know. Primate is anything that is kind of monkey-like, as far as I know. Um, so we would be primates. Bush babies would be primates. Baboons are primates. Vervet monkeys are primates. Um, so it's any kind of mammal that is that so basically monkeys, baboons, the great apes, um, things like gibbons and humans and old and new world monkeys, bush babies, they all fall within the primate group. Lemurs as well from Madagascar, those are all primates. So the actual definition of a primate is a mammal that has hands and feet that can grasp, a relatively large complex brain, and vision in which objects are seen in 3 dimensions. And it includes human beings, apes, monkeys, and other relatives like lemurs and tarsiers. So yes, a baboon is definitely a primate, as are we. And all primates are mammals. There's a bit of a argy-bargy going on there. Possibly some mating activity. They sometimes make that noise when they are mating with one another. The big dominant male doesn't seem too concerned. He can be part of a coalition, in which case he wouldn't really mind if his brothers are mating with the females. Just like male lions, male baboons will form coalitions. They are just so entertaining to watch, though. The scratching, the allo grooming, the playing. They're so incredibly human. Yeah. This is also quite typical in a baboon troop where we get these kinds of arguments breaking out and disciplinary procedures happen. Looks like possibly a young male that's being disciplined there by an older male. Maybe he got a little bit too familiar with one of the females, but something got the older male angry with him. Kate, you asking, do you think the baboons notice the similarities between us and them, hence making them more comfortable around us? I wouldn't say that it's impossible. I always feel that we don't give animals the credit for the kind of cognitive abilities that they do have. And if you think that baboons communicate a lot using body language, and our body language in so many ways is actually quite similar to theirs. So I would imagine that they possibly can understand us better than, say, a more distantly related species would, because we do have such very similar body language. Those two, it's almost like they're copying each other the way they're sitting there. So yes, I would imagine that they possibly can see that we are quite similar to them. Whether that makes them feel more comfortable around us or less comfortable, I'm not sure. I think that probably has a lot to do with their previous experience with humans. In areas where they've been persecuted, they certainly aren't very comfortable. And in areas where they are conserved and protected, they are far more comfortable. So I think it also has a lot to do with each individual's previous experience with humans. Joan, you say that's a little family argument with the baboons. Yeah, that was quite loud, quite intense, but they can be quite loud and intense. I've noticed that I have a regular troop of vervet monkeys that comes through my garden most days, and sometimes you think that they are murdering each other the way they scream. You go out and there's a bit of a fight happening, and it sounds horrific, but it all kind of settles down eventually, and everyone's happy. But they certainly are very vocal when they fight, and it's the same with baboons. Very, very vocal. There's some huge males in this troop. And it works similar to a lion coalition. The dominant males will eventually force the young males out. They won't want the potential threat of these young males mating with their females. So when they reach a certain age, they're not going to be tolerated anymore and they'll be chased out. How lovely is that? All different shapes and sizes drinking together. Hi, Carla. You're asking, are elephant trunks lengths proportional to their age? Does a longer oh, trunk or tusk? Does a longer tusk indicate an old elephant? Um, so certainly the trunks, I don't think that the length is proportional to the age. I think the length is just kind of, well, it's proportional to body size, but I don't think as they get older, the trunk gets proportionately longer. In terms of tusks, yes, tusks do grow as the elephants get bigger. Their tusks certainly get proportionately bigger. But that also is to do with genetics. So there are some elephants that can be quite old and have fairly small tusks compared to another elephant of a similar age. So that is not necessarily only about age. It can be to do with genetics and inheritance. And then, of course, some elephants are born with no tusks, or should I say, they're born. All elephants are born with no tusks. What I mean is, some elephants never develop tusks. They just, the gene for tusks is not there, and they never develop a tusk. That is quite rare. Obviously, in places where they are poached or persecuted for their tusks, or where trophy hunting is a big thing, then it really favors elephants to not have tusks, because then they're not poached or persecuted and they can survive long enough to breed. And so in some places where hunting pressure was very heavy, or there was a lot of bad poaching, you get these populations that have many individuals in them with no tusks. An example of that would be in Addo Elephant Park in South Africa, in the Eastern Cape. Mm. And Carla, you also say that you're watching with your cat Mittens, who loves watching too. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to know that you're sitting watching with your cat. I have a dog who, when she was a puppy, she loved watching TV. She's become a little bit less interested in it as she's got older. I think she's become more interested in my fish pond. She's now obsessed with the fish in the fish pond. But as a young puppy, she was very, very aware of what was going on the television. It was very interesting. It's the first dog I've had that's really shown any interest in the television screen. So it's quite marvelous when you have a pet that will sit and watch with you. Baboon looked like she was removing a thorn or something from her hand. Must be amazing to have the ability to do that so easily. I've watched lions and leopards try to get thorns out of their feet, and it's never a very easy process with their mouth trying to get a thorn. Whereas with that baboon, it looked pretty quick and straightforward to just pull whatever it was that was bothering her out, throw it away. So, Leroy, you're saying you had a vervet monkey jump off the roof and snatch a banana out of your hand. Well, yeah, they do that in places where they've become accustomed to associating humans with food. You've got to be really careful. Um, they certainly do. The ones I have in my garden will sit and watch the kitchen door from the tree outside the kitchen, and the minute they see that there are no dogs or humans around, they'll come right into the house and grab things out of the fruit bowl on the countertop. So try and make sure when the troop is moving through that I close up the kitchen so that there's less chance of them needing to raid the house. And then just I try and plant as many food plants in my gardens so that at least these poor creatures who have been displaced from so much of their natural habitat, and where people have, torn down beautiful food trees and planted ornamental roses and things like that, try and create a place where if they come into the garden, they can find food, but it's their natural food. It's the trees and with the fruit and the berries and flowers that they wouldn't naturally have been eating in that ecosystem. Look at that. No grooming. Those two look about the same age. It's unlikely that they're brother and sister. It's not often that baboons will have chimps. They could be related to one another, being in the same troop. They could be cousins. So entertaining. Oh, imagine being a photographer at this waterhole. There's just so much opportunity to take the most beautiful shots of these baboons with their reflections in the water. Yawn. The yawns there are often not for the same purpose as when we yawn. Sometimes it's just a case of wanting to show off your big teeth. So they will yawn to show a potential um, rival how big their teeth are. Lady Macbeth, you say you've had them steal apples. Your fault for leaving the door open. Yeah, vervets, they're very good at learning where they can get food, and if they get food once, they'll come back and see if it's available again. It can be quite challenging, living in areas where there are regular troops that move through. I know many of my friends in KwaZulu-Natal just hate the vervets. But why, I don't obviously don't hate them. I absolutely love them. I love having them in the garden, and I've just tried to provide them with enough food from the garden that they're not as tempted to come inside. I suppose having big dogs also helps. Um, it does help. So, Calvin, you're asking an interesting question. How similar are the immune systems of baboons to ours? So, let's start with some of the primates that are more closely related to us. So, I remember, I'm going to use a personal example here because I've experienced this. I remember going to see the mountain gorillas in Bwindi Impenetrable Forest in Uganda, and it's very controlled the way you hike up into the mountains. You pay for your day of viewing that particular group, and off you go. There's a small number of you in the group. I seem to remember it was 8 of us, plus the 2 guides. And then once you find them, you can only spend an hour with them. So these gorillas are habituated, but it's done in a very controlled way so that they're not being exposed to humans all day, every day. You spend your hour and then you leave, and for the rest of the day, they have no humans around them. And that's partly to try and minimize disease contact. And also, if you go to see these gorillas, if you are sick, they ask you, you've got to sign a declaration beginning to say that you are not sick. And if the guides have any reason to believe that you are sick, so if you're coughing, if you're sneezing, they actually won't let you go. And that's because it is actually very easy for a human disease to pass on to a gorilla. And that goes for all the great apes, chimpanzees. It's the same, bonobos, it would be the same, orangutans, the same. Um, because baboons are primates, they do share a lot of our diseases with us. They're slightly further removed, though, than a gorilla or a chimp or a bonobo would be. So they're not great apes, they are still primates. And so, yes, it is possible for us um, it is possible for diseases to be transmitted between a human and a baboon. Maybe not as many of the diseases as would be the case with gorillas or chimps or the great apes, but because they are primates, um, they we can. transmit diseases to them. I think that's why a lot of disease research is done on primates, on monkeys. So, you know, with disease research and all these labs that are researching various contagious diseases, they use monkeys for that because they are so closely related to humans. I'm um, not in favor of what they do to these monkeys, but I'm just saying, you know, it's the reality. They do. The medical research labs do often experiment on chimpanzees and rhesus monkeys and all kinds of other primates when they are researching human disease, sadly. Sometimes what also happens is where we have developed immunity to certain diseases because of being exposed to them on a regular basis. Animals like gorillas maybe haven't, so the disease can affect them because they haven't been exposed to the disease like we have. They don't have the relevant immunity to that disease, so it can affect them far worse than it does us. And that's one of the reasons why things like a common cold, if you have a common cold, it's not a serious problem. But if you're going to go and see the gorillas in Uganda with a common cold, it could be a problem. And so that's why, even if it's just something as simple as a cold, you are asked to be honest and not to go. Or if the guides suspect that you've got a cold, they will literally stop you going on that trip to see the gorillas. So immunity is something that is developed over time. You can have a basic immune system. So you can have a basic immune system, but then, you know, our immune systems are constantly being developed throughout our lives. And that happens because of exposure to disease. So the first time you get exposed to a disease, you probably get quite sick. Um, the next time your immune system has learnt to recognize that disease, and so the next time you get exposed to it, the immune system already has a mechanism to fight that disease in place. And so our immune systems kind of evolve with us as we pass through life, and because of the, you know, the bacteria and viruses and pathogens that we get exposed to, um, we develop immune systems that correspond to that. So you can, you know, from a person's blood, you can probably tell which diseases they've been exposed to in the past just by looking at um, the immunity that they have. Um, but so common diseases that go around amongst humans are not necessarily common with gorillas or with chimpanzees or with any of our relatives. And so common disease that we would be immune to would potentially be a problem for other primates. But it's quite amazing that we can train our immune systems like that. It's one of the reasons why I was very happy to let my children play in the mud and the dirt and just be, goofy kids and expose themselves to all these bacteria and viruses. Anyway, we're going to stay in Kenya still. I think we're going to head back to Oldonyo and see what's happening there. Leave this chap to his meditations at the waterside. Oh, wow. Gosh, look at some of these elephants. They are real giants with tusks to match. The two that were here earlier were quite big in their body size, but their tusks were quite small. Now we've got a few really big tuskers. Very special. And obviously the giraffe in the background is quite special too. They're going to have to wait their turn. I don't think the elephants are going to be too keen to share the water with them. Lovely to see 6 full elephants at this little waterhole. Very special. Well, this links back to the question earlier about the tusk size, because you can see a lot of these elephants are similar in their body size, and yet there's such a wide range in the size of the tusks there. Elephants grow throughout their lives. They're not like humans where, they hit puberty, they have a growth spurt, and then they reach a point not too long after that where they stop growing. Elephants will actually grow pretty much constantly. So elephant that's big in body is pretty old, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to have big tusks. Milo, you're asking toward end of their lives, do elephants have a lot of ailments? It's an interesting question, Milo. So, you know, you probably know that elephants have a certain number of teeth, 6 sets of teeth. And as one set is worn down, the next set that comes towards the back of the mouth moves forward. And, and they then use that until that wears down. And then the next set, kind of almost on a conveyor belt, pushes out and pushes the previous set forward. And this happens 6 times. And so when they're on their last set of teeth, and that set of teeth is getting worn down, they start to show signs of malnourishment because they can't eat properly anymore. And so you'll find them looking quite skinny. And I suppose, if you think about humans that are malnourished probably don't have the best immune systems, and they might be more prone to succumbing to a disease. I've never read any scientific work on this, but it would make sense to me that a malnourished elephant might also have the same kind of process going on, where because their bodies aren't well nourished, their immune systems maybe aren't functioning at optimal level, and you might find that they are more prone to getting various diseases. But most people, when they talk about, well, an old elephant bull that dies, they will talk about it dying from being malnourished and not necessarily dying from a disease. So I suppose there'd have to be some more research done on those really old individuals that die of, in inverted commas, let's call it natural causes, to see whether there was the presence of any disease, or whether it was really just a case of them almost starving to death because their teeth eventually don't function very well anymore. Most of these animals, they can't afford to become kind of geriatric the way humans do. Um, we've modified our environments, our local environments, to the extent that we can kind of take force of nature out of it, as it were. Whereas animals can't. Once they get old and slow and are not really capable anymore, they die. They die pretty quickly. They either die through predation or they just die. A human can be looked after and you put on all kinds of machines to prolong their lives and have all these ailments that they can live with for an extended period of time. So you can extend their lifespan when they're not healthy. With wild animals, the minute their health deteriorates, it's normally very soon after that their life comes to an end, just because of the pressure that's on them in the environment, whether it be predation or just, really, really tough to keep moving around and trying to find food and water. So they probably wouldn't live with many ailments for a long time, simply because nature just doesn't allow that to happen. What a magnificent scene, though. 6 huge bull elephants, just all peacefully drinking together. Yeah, I think it's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. Here, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. Why are elephants in circuses and poaching not a big issue in South Africa? I'm not sure if that's two separate questions. So, elephants in circuses, I mean, I absolutely abhor any form of performing animals in any circus, particularly wild animals. Maybe domestic animals is different, but um, there are some circuses in South Africa that still keep elephants, much to my horror. I think it's become less and less. There's a lot of pressure on those kinds of organizations to stop doing what they're doing. Um, but I don't know how that links to poaching, so I'm not sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Poaching of ivory in South Africa, of elephants for ivory in South Africa, it went through a patch of being bad, and then it hasn't been for a long time. So, touch wood, we actually haven't had much of a problem with elephant poaching down in South Africa. There is odd report of it happening closer to our kind of northern and eastern borders, but we are really dealing with a rhino poaching pandemic problem in South Africa. But elephant poaching, not so much. I'm not quite sure why that is the case. It's not like poachers can't get into our parks. That's, the poachers are there and they are taking rhinos, so there's no reason why they they shouldn't take elephant tusks, other than perhaps that rhino horn is just worth so much more than elephant tusks right now. And so perhaps it's not worth risking everything for an elephant tusk. Here you are saying it looks like 1 ton is here towards the back. I did notice an elephant with really big tusks. I think you might be right. There are some quite magnificent bulls here. So I haven't had a look to see if he's got a bit of his right tusk missing, because I know 1 ton does have some of his right tusk missing. But yeah, that looks like it could be him. The right tusk is definitely quite a bit shorter than the left. Okay, well, we're going to leave this elephant pool party for now and have a little look at what's happening at Hwange Safari Lodge in Zimbabwe, a little bit further south than where we are right now. Oh, wow, look at the grey crowned cranes. How special is this? Beautiful to see a little flock of grey crowned cranes. Cranes are birds of grassland, and grassland is under so much pressure in Africa for agriculture. And so many of our crane species are threatened. So it is very special to see flocks of these birds like this, with a marabou stork in the background there, and a little impala relaxing. What a lovely scene. So I know in South Africa, so Zimbabwe's just north of us, but in South Africa, I know that grey crowned cranes are classified as endangered, and it's mainly due to loss of habitat, loss of that grassland habitat that they need. Also, poisoning and collisions with power lines. Farmers don't like them because they're seen as kind of going into the farmers' crops and feeding on maize and maize seedlings. But they also feed on pests. So really, if you're a farmer, you need to look at both sides of the coin. These birds are really good at getting rid of some pests that feed on the crops. So yeah, quite heartbreaking that such magnificent birds do get poisoned quite a lot. So along with the pressure of disappearing habitat and collisions with power lines and collisions with wind turbines and things like that, they also have to contend with farmers poisoning them. So yeah, very special to see such a big flock of them. love to know what they're feeding on there. They do eat grass seeds and things, but they also go for frogs and insects, grasshoppers. It seems to me like they are picking the seeds off the grass, though, if I look at what they're doing. Amazing to see a flock like this in flight as well. That's always very special to hear them calling as they fly. They have quite a haunting call that they make as they fly. Very closely related to our national bird, which is the blue crane. Oh, look how beautiful they are, though. I can't imagine anyone wanting to poison that. I really can't. Boggles my mind. Interesting to see how they're walking together in quite a tight little group. They're not spreading out, they're staying together. Do they use their crests for mating purposes? Dora asks. So they kind of do. It's so when you look at a grey crown crane, it can be quite difficult to tell male from female because both the males and the females have the crest. Um, so the crest, um, I'm sure the crest would be used as a sign that the bird is sexually mature, because if you look at a young grey-crowned crane, they don't have that very distinctive crest yet. So it would be a sign of sexual maturity, in which case it would be used for breeding purposes as a sign that yes, this is this is another individual in full adult plumage and therefore capable of breeding. Hey, Johan, you saying I'm the rare bird magnet. I wish that was the case. I've been on a few birding trips to look for rare birds where they haven't materialized. I'd love to be the rare bird magnet. But I do love my birding. I really enjoy it. We had such lovely birding at Juma just before I left. Some interesting birds turning up with all the rain, which was lovely. And they definitely, to me, seem to be feeding on the grass seeds. Yes, Ezra, the little red patch that you see under their chin is a dewlap. Um, it's similar to a dewlap. Sorry, it's called a wattle so it's kind of the same thing as a dewlap in that a dewlap in mammals would be often something that helps with heat, to get rid of heat. It can serve the wattle in birds can serve the same purpose. It can also make them look a bit bigger, make them look more attractive to the opposite sex, which is also similar in mammals, that dewlap can make a male, certainly in the males, look a lot bigger and more attractive to the opposite sex. So even though it's not called the same thing, can have a very similar function. Dark mane lover, you're asking, do you have lots of invasive birds in South Africa? Not a lot, but there are certainly some that have become a huge problem. One that springs to mind in my home area is the Indian myna, which was introduced to control various pests in the sugarcane when sugarcane was introduced to South Africa in the 1800s. And then the myna was introduced to deal with, I think it was some kind of a beetle, if I remember correctly, that was attacking the sugarcane. But they have really become a problem there, particularly with our native starling species. They outcompete, they're quite closely related to the starlings and utilize similar habitats, similar nesting, nesting holes and things. And so they end up outcompeting the indigenous starlings for breeding space and for habitat. So a big problem. Then there are various lovebirds that have escaped from cages that have become a problem. Um, some of they've hybridized. They can't even really. They're similar to what we would call our rosy-faced lovebirds, but they have hybridized, and there are large flocks of them, especially in the Eastern Cape. They're a big problem. Just trying to think what other birds are a problem. The rose-ringed parakeets, which I know are a problem in London and England, where they've been released, have become a big problem in South Africa as well. In some places, they have, just because they outcompete with the endemic birds, and compete with them for nesting, availability of nesting sites, for food. So yes, there are certainly bird species in South Africa that are a problem, that don't belong here and have kind of invaded and taken over. And it's never their fault. It's always humans that are the real source of the problem. Okay, well, let's go over to Cat Eye and see what there is on offer there. So Cat Eye is back in South Africa. So we've come from Kenya in the north, we've headed south to Zimbabwe, and now further south into South Africa. And Olifants West Game Reserve is part of the Greater Kruger, and we have a giraffe coming down to drink. Yeah, it looks like he's decided not to come down for a drink. He had a good look at the waterhole and then decided to leave, unless he's going to go around to the other side. Maybe he's going to come around. It's very windy, which could be a reason that he's a little bit uneasy. I noticed it earlier when I was watching the Djuma dam cam just before we went live. It's very, very windy up in that part of the world at the moment. And it might just make that giraffe a little bit uneasy. They're very vulnerable when they come down to drink. Stretch those legs far out and lower their neck and their head. They can't see. They're in a very awkward position. They can't just run away very quickly. They've got to clamber themselves up again and then run. So it's because of the wind, he's decided to rather not drink at the moment. Must be quite the little chicks that are in those buffalo weavers' nests are getting buffeted around. They must be feeling quite seasick right now. Okay, well, the camera there froze. It wasn't panning to follow the giraffe's movement, so we with our grey crowned cranes here in Twange. Lovely to see how the two species here just seem pretty unconcerned about each other. Not worried, even though they're competing for the same resource. There's enough to go around. Everyone can share. Us humans could learn a few lessons from that. So, question coming through, do the males and the females both have the crown on top of their head? And the answer is yes. It's very difficult to tell the sexes apart with this particular species. They look identical to one another. So not like a saddle-billed stork where, the male has got that wattle and the female doesn't have a wattle. With grey-crowned cranes, the sexes are completely alike. Just going to quickly look and see if there's any size difference. There certainly isn't a plumage difference. I don't even think it talks about a size difference. No, just looking in my bird book here, there's no difference in size between the male and the female either that's been recorded here. So yeah, very difficult to say there whether we're looking at all males or females or a mixed group. So they are monogamous. They do, when they breed, they'll pair off, and it'll be one male with one female, and they'll raise their chicks together. But once the breeding season is finished, they congregate in these larger groups. A lot of cranes, and this species is no exception, have quite elaborate dances that go on between the male and female when they're courting one another. They'll kind of flap their wings around and kick their legs up and put on quite a display. The interesting thing with these birds is that the males and the females get involved in the dance. In some birds, it's just the male kind of displaying to the female, and the female just sits and watches and kind of chooses the best mate. But with grey-crowned cranes and with many of the other crane species, the both sexes get involved in the dance and the display. Yeah, lots of grey go-away birds in the background, sounding quite upset about something. Cranes don't seem to be too worried. It's possibly a bird of prey that's upsetting the grey go-away birds. And it would take a rather large bird of prey to get the cranes worried. Okay, well, let's leave these cranes for now with their foraging and go over to Tau Lodge and see what's happening at the waterhole at Tau. Wow, look how green it is. It's incredible how it's greened up. I mean, I know we have had so much rain in South Africa over the last month or so. It made such a huge difference to this waterhole. I actually can't believe it's the same waterhole as what we were looking at the beginning of the summer before the rains had come. Lovely little herd of impala there coming down for a drink. Some blacksmith plovers or blacksmith lapwings on the edge of the water. Very orderly fashion, these impala making their way down to the waterhole in single file. So the question, is there a reason why the crop is so white? Could it be a lack of sunlight? I don't think so. I think it might just be the angle, that there's some kind of a reflection on his back that's making him look more white. It could also be something to do with the soil. Often the minerals in the soil, if he's been in the mud and then the water's evaporated, he could have kind of the color of the soil on his back. Some mud, when the water evaporates, can look grayish, kind of a very light gray color. So it could be that as well. I don't think it has anything to do with lack of sunlight. In my mind, it's probably more a reflection on his back that's making him look very light colored. This time of the year, the animals don't need to move too far from the water to get food. As the dry season progresses, there's just no greenery at all around these water holes. But right now, they can spend a lot of their time very close to water, which makes life easier for them. They don't have to trek long distances to get to the water. There seem to be a lot of these white butterflies fluttering around as well. I know there's an annual dispersal of these butterflies. Most of the white ones will be a butterfly called a brown veined white, and they kind of disperse from the southwestern part of the country in a northeasterly direction. Um, they the eggs are laid on members of the Boskia family of trees, and then the larvae hatch and feed on that food plant, and then they obviously metamorphosize into butterflies, and those butterflies then disperse um, in a northeasterly direction. I was reading something really interesting the other day, though, where someone had reported from the Kruger Park that they had seen the butterflies going in the opposite direction. They seemed to be moving in a westerly direction rather than the normal kind of northeasterly movement. And they were wondering whether that had to do with local weather conditions, which I thought was really interesting. I suppose it could. So, Mindy, you're asking how can some animals like hippos and crocs hold their breath for so long without suffering from a lack of oxygen to their brains? So certainly with crocodiles, the way they do it is reptiles have an amazing ability to slow down their metabolism. And so once they take in oxygen, by slowing down their metabolism, they're actually slowing down the rate at which the body is using up that oxygen. And so there's not, you don't actually get the depletion of oxygen in the blood like you would where we can't really control our metabolism much. Our metabolism is kind of a background thing that runs along, chugs along, and allows our body to function. But the crocodiles and most reptiles have the ability to just slow that metabolism down, which is how they can estivate. Um, it's one of the ways that that they can. Well, certainly one of the ways that a crocodile can spend so long under the water. Um, Hippos have very big lungs. Um, Now, they can't slow their metabolism down like a crocodile can. Um, but, they do have very, very large lungs that can take in a lot of oxygen. And I'm just wondering whether they can do anything else other than the fact that they just take in so much oxygen. So they can stay submerged for about 5 minutes, which it's not 5 to 8 minutes. I've read some books that say up to 8 minutes. That you can train yourself to hold your breath. Even as humans, if you think about fishermen that go under the water, they can train themselves to hold their breath for a number of minutes. So I suppose it's a similar thing with hippos. From a very young age, they start training themselves to hold their breath underwater. I don't think there's any special kind of metabolic adaptations in the hippos other than, the fact that they would do have quite big lungs, but I think they probably just um, train themselves to hold their breath for longer. Also, when hippos are under the water, um, they're often just resting. So, if they were moving around vigorously under the water, that their bodies would require a lot of oxygen, and so then they would have to resurface to take another breath. But because when they submerge like that, they're keeping quite still, which means that their muscles are not needing that much oxygen. And so that also helps, I think, to allow them to stay under for longer. So I see that the record for the longest breath hold underwater by a human is 24 minutes, which puts hippos to shame, if that stat is correct about hippos. So it's not like we can't hold our breaths underwater for longer. It's just that we haven't really trained ourselves to do it. But you can go through a process of training yourself to hold your breath for longer. And I would imagine that hippos from very young age um, just naturally are going through that process and are therefore able to hold their breath underwater for longer than we would naturally be able to do. Crocodile looks super relaxed. He looks like he's not really too bothered about eating today. Just hasn't moved an inch. He's exposing himself, not really trying to hide, just enjoying his little snooze in the water. And the impala seem to be leaving in as orderly a fashion as they arrived. I'm thinking there must be a game path there, which is what they're walking on, following the same path to and from the water, sort of a narrow game path, possibly even a hippo path. The grey go-away birds here are also alarming, but I'm sure it's probably just a bird of prey or something that's upsetting them. So many birds calling in the background. It's quite lovely to just listen. Okay, well, let's go back up to Kenya, back up north to Lentor, where I think we have another primate that's come down for a trip. Oh, how lovely is that? So we had baboons earlier, now we have some vervet monkeys. Kenya's quite spoilt with the number of primates that they see up there. Here down in South Africa, And we have our chacma baboons, and we have vervet monkeys and some mango monkeys. And then the two species of bush babies. In Kenya, there's a number of different species of primates. But this one is typical of the savanna biome, the vervet monkey. Others are more common in the more forested areas. Beautiful big male on the right. Very apparent that it's a male by the color of his genitalia there. Francine, you're asking if vervet monkeys and baboons get along. I think they normally avoid each other. I know there was a very interesting moment that was captured, I'm sure it was at the Djuma Dam Cam not so long ago, of a vervet monkey actually grooming a baboon. So the baboon was standing as he would for another member of his troop to kind of groom him and look for skin parasites. But it wasn't another member of his troop grooming him, it was actually a vervet monkey. So there certainly are cases where they do get along. But for the most part, in my experience, they tend to avoid each other. I think it's more the vervets that avoid the baboons. The particular case that where I saw the video clip from the Djuma Dam Camp, um, the baboon that was being groomed was quite a young baboon. It wasn't a baby, but it was kind of a not a very big adult baboon. It looked more like a sub-adult. And I don't know if it was why. I have no idea what went through the vervet monkey's mind, why he was grooming the baboon, whether he was hoping that the baboon would reciprocate, I'm not sure. Whether it was a vervet monkey that had been picked out of his troop, as does happen with young males. Lots of questions around that incident, but it was caught on film and was really rather fascinating. See how aware those monkeys are when they're on the ground. Every little flutter of wing or noise, and they are kind of aware of it and looking up. Definitely more vulnerable on the ground, so they have to be aware. Oh, but that little one was getting such a lovely scratch and groom from probably mum or an older sibling maybe. Oh, look at those teeth. My goodness, there's a tiny, tiny little vervet monkey playing in the background there in the tree. Really tiny. Lenny, you saying that lions and baboons are your favorite African animals? Yeah. Baboons are very entertaining, as are the vervet monkeys. Primates are incredibly entertaining. I think we probably find them so entertaining because they are so similar to us. We can kind of relate in many ways to what they're doing. Oh, wow. Here we have some impala coming down for a drink. Often antelope will move around with troops of monkeys or baboons for a number of reasons. Just look at that male impala. Their horns are so much bigger than our impala down south. It always amazes me when I see the males there. They are just magnificent looking creatures. But yes, impala will often move around with a troop of monkeys or baboons because firstly, they gain added protection. It's more eyes and ears, especially with the monkeys being up in the trees. They can see further and they can warn the impala if there is imminent danger. And then also, as the monkeys and baboons move around in the trees, they often drop fruit and leaves and flowers and seed pods and all kinds of interesting things that the impala maybe can't reach on its own. So you'll often find a little group of antelope feeding around a tree where vervets or baboons are feeding as well. It's not just impala either. There's a number of antelope species that will do that. I've seen it many times with Inyala and with various species of duiker, just moving around below where the primates are feeding. Beautiful male impala. Magnificent. Cool roaring of the kind of dominant male impala as the rutting season approaches. So their rutting season up there will be different to ours down here. All depends on the rains, and their rainy season is different to ours. So we are not going through any kind of rut at the moment in South Africa. That'll happen more around April, May. But up in Kenya, that timing will be slightly different. That roaring of that impala seemed to upset the monkeys, though. It can initially sound a bit like an alarm call. If you listen very briefly, the start of it can sound like an alarm call, and then if you're an experienced person in the bush, you'll quickly be able to say, "Oh, okay, no, that's not an alarm call. That's just a rutting call." I think the monkeys maybe initially also thought it was an alarm, looking a bit nervous. Just making sure there's nothing approaching. Lenny, you're asking if monkeys and primates can see all colors or just some. So they have very similar eyesight to what we do. Their color vision needs to be good because monkeys are fruit eaters for the most part. And being fruit eaters, they need to be able to tell when a fruit is ripe. And so fruits are colorful and their color changes when they become ripe. And so primates need to be able to see that. So most primates, possibly not your nocturnal ones. So not your bush babies or galagos or any primate that is nocturnal, because they need to be able to see better at night, so they need more rods on the retina of their eye than cones. We as humans have more cone cells than rod cells, which gives us our fantastic color vision. And the diurnal species of primates would be very similar, um, especially ones whose diet revolves around fruit eating. Sweet. Okay, well, we are going to stay in Kenya, but we're going to go over to Oldonyo again. I think we have a very special elephant that's arrived at the waterhole. Oh, wow. Okay, so the Ellie that we saw earlier was definitely not 1 ton. This is, you can see his right tusk there, quite a bit shorter than the left where it's been broken, which was similar to the Ellie earlier, but this guy well, is quite spectacular, isn't he? Look at that. And see how sunken in the sections of his skull are just above his eyes, if you compare it to the elephant to his left. Oh, interesting that the giraffe is being brave enough to come and drink with the Ellies here. Often they wait their turn, but I see there's 2 giraffes there drinking. That's lovely to see. And he's having a little bit of a shoving match between them. Seems to be instigated by 1 ton. And just really very obvious to see the sunken in sections of his skull, which is an indication of his age. Someone's saying you've never noticed how thick the top of a giraffe's tail is. Yes, there almost seems to be like fatty deposits at the top there. Quite amazing that these giraffes are being brave enough to come and drink with the Ellies here. I've seen many instances where the elephants just don't tolerate them and chase them away. They are staying on the opposite side of the little pan to the Ellies, though. Oh, look at the tusks on one tongue, though. Wow, he really is a very special boy. That giraffe on the left, his tail looks a lot thicker on the top than the one on the right. It's possibly got to do with it having been aggravated, maybe some ticks. That's a place where ticks like to go. It looks almost like it's got some growths on the top of the tail there. Maybe a bit of a swelling. Three ellies and three giraffes. And they all seem to be males. Actually, this giraffe here is a female. The one that had its rear end towards us. The other two are males, but that one was a female. I would love to know how old one ton is. I'm sure someone must know. There's a number of very long running elephant research projects up in that part of the world. Oh, something disturbed them. What was that? Something gave them all a big fright. Unless it was just the one elephant overreacting to a noise, which then caused all the others to overreact. I can't see anything that would have startled them, though. This chap seems to have a little bit of a bump on top of his trunk, which looks a bit unnatural. Maybe an abscess or something, old injury there. There definitely seems to be a bit of unease amongst these ellies, almost as if they are testing just testing each other's boundaries and strengths. The way that elephant's got his trunk curled over his tusk is very distinctive of an elephant that is, feeling a little bit uneasy, maybe having a little bit of attitude. Joan Miller, you say 1 ton looks good. Happy to see him. Yeah, he does. He looks in perfect health, albeit quite elderly, but he does. He looks in very good health. Obviously wasn't finished with his drink when he got startled, so he's coming back. And this chap here with his trunk resting on his tusk is definitely showing a little bit of attitude. You can see with 1 ton, as with many individuals that get a little bit old, there's a sharpness to kind of the shoulder blade area. There's a little bit more visibility of the spine. It's nothing concerning, but it's just a case of not probably not being able to put on weight as easily as a younger elephant. Probably has a lot to do with his teeth. There are definite indications of I wouldn't say malnourishment at this stage, but just of an elephant that's starting to look elderly. But he does look good for his age. I say for his age. I'm not entirely sure how old he is, but he certainly looks like he's well into his 50s to me. Darkman Lover, you say he's absolutely impressive. You are right. He's a magnificent boy. The stories he could tell, I'm sure. I'd love to be able to hear them. Darren, do older elephants get more breeding rights, you ask? Certainly a lot more than the younger elephants, but as they age, just like, with many species, when they're in their prime, he's past his prime now. He's an elderly elephant. So I would be surprised if he's coming into must anymore. So it's generally the bulls in must that get most of the breeding rights. They are very distinctive. They're very easily recognizable by the females. They have, even humans can smell that musty smell. And their testosterone levels are higher. Possibly their sperm count might even be higher. Their ability to father young is probably better. And so females will prefer to mate with a bull in must than a bull that isn't in must. And I wonder whether he is coming into must that regularly anymore. But certainly, the bulls in the prime of their lives are very heavy, they're very big, and through sheer size, they can outcompete the younger bulls, and so would definitely get more chances to mate than the younger bulls would. Yeah, it really is quite incredible to be in the presence, as it were, of such an amazing bull elephant, one of the last remaining whiskers. There are so few of them because of us, and sadly, there are still areas in East Africa where these tuskers are sought after by trophy hunters. Thankfully, Kenya doesn't abide with trophy hunting, and neighboring Tanzania does. So hopefully his roamings keep him within the protected parts of Kenya, where he will keep safe, because he really is a very, very impressive animal. And these big old bulls, the knowledge that they carry, that they can pass on to future generations of elephants, you can't discount that. The young bulls will move around with him and learn from him. And they'll learn where to go to when there's a drought. He'll know, because he would have experienced cycles of drought and plenty, and he'll know when drought hits where he can go to find water. He will know so many things that allow him to survive in this hostile environment. And if you take those bulls out of the population because you feel you're a trophy hunter and you have the right to pay to shoot a bull like this, you are removing such incredible knowledge from an elephant population. It just it makes me wild. Sorry, I get really quite emotional about that. Yeah, he is just a repository of knowledge that is needed, that these young bulls need to learn from him. Just can't help but feel awe in his presence. Yeah, Mindy, you say you're sure that they are conversing and you would love to know what they're talking about. Yeah, me too. I'm sure that they are chatting to each other. And Darren, you've sent some info uh, on one ton having been treated twice by the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. The Sheldrick Wildlife Trust is such a phenomenal organization in Kenya. They do a lot for orphaned elephants that have lost their parent, lost their mothers either to poaching incidents or human wildlife conflict, or for whatever reasons. They have this orphanage where they raise these elephants and then release them back into the wild, which is just phenomenal. And then also just treating elephants that have had snares around them, elephants that have you know, been speared in human wildlife conflict or been shot in human wildlife conflict. They're a phenomenal. If anyone has some spare cash around and wants to or feels the need to contribute to some form of conservation project, I can highly recommend the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. They just do the most phenomenal work up there in Kenya. Tanya Rousseau, you saying you wonder how many little Ellies he has got running around. Yeah, I'm sure he has fathered many, many, many calves in his day. I'm sure he's passed those genes on far and wide. He is a real wise old grandfather. Wise, wise old grandfather, this. I would love to sit there in his actual presence. I've spent quite a bit of time up in Kenya and Tanzania. I don't think I've ever seen a tusker quite this big. I saw a magnificent tusker in the Ngorongoro crater once, but I don't think he was quite this size. There certainly seems to be an element of mutual respect between these two bulls. You get the sense that they know each other well, that they are used to spending time together. But look at that reaction now. That's so interesting. Here comes a bull that we're getting a slightly different reaction from one ton there. He's moving off. He might have a sense of, that he's older now and that he's not as capable of tackling the stronger, younger bulls anymore. Maybe doesn't have the muscle strength that he had in his younger years. This bull looks a little bit cheeky. And very interesting to see how one ton just avoided him there. I'm sure he knows his own limitations. Mindy, you saying you went to the Sheldrick Wildlife Facility when you were up in Kenya and saw how the keepers bottle feed the young ellies. Oh, that is so on my bucket list to do. I didn't get to the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. I met Daphne Sheldrick actually. I had the pleasure of having her come around with me on game drive when I worked at Londolozi many years ago, and she was on my vehicle for about 4 or 5 days. And what an incredible woman! Gosh, I just could have spent many more days learning from her and chatting to her. She's a phenomenal lady who unfortunately has passed on, but yeah, very, very privileged to have met her. Catherine, you say you've seen one ton 20 years ago on your first safari and you would love to see him again. Well, yeah, I'm very envious that you've actually had the chance to meet him. Darkmane Lover, you saying thank you um, for Wild Earth and Africam for a lovely live at the Waterhole show. Well, it's been lovely having you on board with us, every single one of you. It's been a fantastic afternoon. We've had some great sightings. I think the highlight being this amazing showing by One Ton. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll be with you again tomorrow. Looking forward to another lovely day, and hopefully we'll have another appearance by One Ton. But whatever happens, I know it's going to be a good one. So thanks everyone for being on board. We're going to end with these beautiful elephants and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Bye for now.